Got it.
We're good. Cool. Welcome. This is how many people, how many seniors, juniors, pre-design, what we got here? Seniors, juniors, pre-design. Got a nice little list. Graduates. Wow. I didn't even think about that one. That's a good one. That's awesome. Cool. Oh, we'll see the colors, but that's fine. Cool. Who am I? My name is Curtis. I am a former CSUS design graduate, former GRIDS club president. Still going. I currently co-own and am like chief creative officer of a design firm here in Sacramento called Yellow Brick Group. So it's beautiful. And we kind of are a full service agency doing brand identities, content creation, apparel, like all sorts of stuff. I mean, primarily we focus on, storytelling through visual identities and branding, design. We have a media department now. See if I hit this with the video. Oh, cool. Awesome. So yeah, we get to work on a bunch of really fun things. We also do a lot of like internal projects for, different community things that we are passionate about. That's kind of one of the cornerstones of our agency is constantly doing stuff that's not just all client focused work, but also things that inspire us and, make us excited about working on design and why we got into creative work in the first place. Outside of that, they will work on a bunch of other stuff. I co-own an apparel company called Alien Labs Apparel. We recently, this last year, got into Zoomies, and now I think we're in like 700 stores around the United States. Been able to work with Travis Scott on a bunch of stuff, Kevin Hart from the Kings, and then for the last year, we've been handling at YBG all the internal merchandising and internal elements for Epic Games. So get to work on Fortnite, Rocket League, Fall Guys, and then some secret projects that are rolling out later this year, which is really fun. And then finally, we have Yellow Brick Events, which we have our flagstone event, the R Street Night Market, which I think we just finished our 5th year doing it, which is crazy. This fully started as a passion project. People thought we were crazy about 5 months into starting our agency. My partners and I were like, hey, we should throw an event. That would be great. We had a lot of friends in the food and beverage industry here in Sacramento, saw how hard it is for our awesome chef friends that were doing stuff to jump to a brick and mortar, and then our friends who owned restaurants to like try something new, introduce something into like their restaurant, right? That's new menus, new training, and it could not work, and then you lose money. So we were like, what if there was a place where you could just experience all different types of food from around Sacramento kind of in one place? It's now grown into like arts and other culture things. We introduced this year, the big thing was working with the Nightwalkers, which they're a dance group ranging from all over California to other states, but it's like battle, all types of like different dance styles. And they held a competition like at the night market with a $1,500 prize, and we had people coming up from Southern California and Nevada all over. So each year trying to introduce like more cultural elements into it. It's great. It started, the first one we did, we were like, yeah, this will be fun. Hopefully people show up, and we had 12,000 people come on a 1 block area in downtown Sacramento. And that was chaotic. And we're like, oh man, that was probably a one-time thing. We'll add another block. Should be plenty of space. 30,000 people showed up the next time. And so now it is about 7 city blocks total. The fun part is when you do something in a city street, it has to look like the day-to-day city that following morning. So we start setup about 5 a.m. and we finish cleaning up around 6 a.m. and it looks like we were never there. And we have about 25,000 people come. It's really great. We are known in Sacramento as like one of the most like culturally diverse cities and especially food areas in the nation. That's why they painted over our beloved water tower with farm to fork capital. But we felt that also too, there was a story that wasn't being told of the smaller mom and pop locations. I mean, that we have such culturally diverse areas all around, from North Sacramento, South Sac, East Sac, right? And a lot of those places aren't generally represented when you think about like, I'm gonna go eat somewhere. So for us, it was being able to have a space where a lot of different diverse food comes together. People get like a snapshot for the night. And the great thing is we do this once a year. All these places are open the rest of the year. So the whole point is to learn about something and then go frequent it the rest of the year and, you know, bring that income to them so we can continue to have these like wonderful locations and artists and all that stuff. So, so yeah, should have skipped this. This was the apparel stuff we work on. Really fun. It was another passion project that kind of just turned into something. I mean, we all liked making merch and just kind of kept building. And we're like, yeah, let's make another collection, and it's just grown. So all that to lead into, oops, go back. Aha. I saw the sneak peek of that slide. But what is design? They want to take just like a, they didn't read the next slide. What design is to you? Yeah. You know? John, what's design mean to you? What's design? How would you define it?
Problem solving.
It's a hard question, right? Like you guys get asked by family members at gatherings, like, what do you do? You know, and you're like, oh, I do design. They're like, oh, cool. So like brochures and stuff, right? Like that's what we all get. So for me personally, I've been designing in some professional manner for about 15 years. I actually was designing freelance and then came back to Sac State in my late 20s to go through this program, specifically to mentor under the people who were here, like the professors. I knew that I could continue kind of doing what I was doing, but there was just this gap that I knew I had, and I knew this program like was, I mean, this is us, Long Beach and San Jose State are three top programs in the state of California. Gwen Amos, who really founded this program, once explained that Long Beach teaches focus in marketing, San Jose teaches a focus in aesthetic, and Sac State's program teaches a focus in strategy. And I think, you know, when you're going through your projects, you really kind of feel that there's a lot of thought into everything. It's not about, hey, we'll teach you how to do these programs really well, right? That's what YouTube's for. It's really like the thinking behind it and the why, which is what people like actually are going to pay you for. It's not about like how well you make this one specific style. It's the thinking. And through the years of design, kind of like how I landed and felt it, you know, what it means to me and how I create in this is it's a, you know, service-based visual solutions, right? So first part, service-based, right? Because we have to get paid for it. You have to have clients. Otherwise, if you're just making it for yourself, that's great, but it's art, right? And then visual solutions, because it's not decorating, right? We're creating stuff for a purpose. We don't want to interpret what a red octagon that says stop is when you encounter it on the street, right? It's very intentional. And then dealing with clients and all the other things over the years, I've kind of landed on this 70-30 rule where it's 70% psychology, 30% art. There's way more human element and thought that goes into design over just the creative, emotional intelligence, communication skills, all these other things that together with the art is what actually kind of makes the design happen. Clients. There's a lot of talk on a lot of meme pages on the internet about clients, right? They're not your enemy. They're not. I promise you. Whatever design pages and you get scared and they talk about like they just don't get it. All these funny. I enjoy them. I've made a few, but at the end of the day, like having clients is how we have jobs, right? And it doesn't have to be this struggle back and forth. Not to say that you're not going to have these nightmare clients, you know, but you learn from those situations and learn to learn to look for those telling signs of a bad client before you get into like a relationship with them. Because at the end of the day, client work is really like being in a relationship, right? The communication, the back and forth, like you can't just, you're wrong, this is why you're wrong, I know more than you. If you're in a relationship and you try that, like it's probably not gonna work out right. Even if you're right, pushing the fact that like, I don't care, like blue's wrong, it should be this, right? It's very much about the communication and finding that like middle ground. And also too, usually when someone is saying something about a design or what they don't like or why they think you're wrong, it's coming from some place and opinion that they have of something. And I've found more times than not, just kind of like trying to peel into that onion a little bit more, you get to a point where you're like, oh, I get why you're looking at it this way, because you have this like preconceived idea of something, or you misinterpreted like what is actually trying to be like resolved with this. And you can get to that point, then you can like have a solution and not just this pushing why your design is good and their idea sucks. Also, something always to think about, especially with like, you know, all this talk on AI and all these new things coming, right? If they knew how to do it, they wouldn't need us. I think that's a really good perspective to just have in general with, you know, design and creative work in that. If there's something that, you know, I tell my team, and I've kind of talked about a lot, where you can make your, you know, your client's problem not your problem until you make them not your client. So it's one of those things about, sure, like they want this, or, you know, you really want it this way, but if you just keep pushing stuff off and not coming with solutions and trying to like create this bridge in partnership with them, they're going to go somewhere else, right? And that's the reality of it. And sometimes they think from the jump that they could do it themselves, and you kind of, you know, can let them explore that option. But at the end of the day, right, like we're here because we're the experts in this and they're not. And it's finding the right way to communicate that and create a partnership with your client. Time versus value. This is another good one, right? This kind of goes back to the whole like busy versus productive thing. I'm so busy. Are you productive though? Right? Like, is it actually like moving you forward with the stuff you're working on? Time versus value is the same thing. Okay, we're in a very unique industry where the better you get at something does not, in other people's minds, equate with a higher value, right? In any other like situation or something where you're doing like what you're doing equals an amount of output, you get paid more. In design, you work, you get better, you get faster. Well, it only took you this long. Why should I pay you this, right? It's a very funny, you know, thing we all sign up to be a part of, but it's a philosophy to like start thinking about like now as you're kind of like starting your design career, is this concept of time versus value. You're not selling time to a client. You're not selling like, oh, well, per hour, this and this. You're selling value, right? And learning how to have that conversation of, okay, cool. So if you want this done in this amount of time, and I'm telling you it's going to take this is going to be the cost of it, right? And you'll get it in that time and it'll be great and everything will be good with it. And they're like, yeah, but what if I get it, or can you do it faster? And it's like, well, yeah, I can do it faster, but like, this is the cost of that, right? Well, should it be less if you work less time on it? Are you going to lower the price of the final product, or is it going to change your price of it if I do it faster? No, right? So it's a value based. It's not a time. And I think that's something that like I had to learn, especially in freelance. Early on, you're just like, a job, money, awesome. Like, I'll do your design. I don't have a portfolio to go off of, you know, like let me just build this and I think I can get this much. And you're going to, I guarantee everyone in this room, if you go off of hourly rate, you're going to hit a cap at some point, because you can't just say like, all right, well then it's like this much per hour, right? Because that sounds wild to people. But if you associate like the cost of the job to the value of the job, you're more likely have someone sign off and gain agreements with you on it, than trying to break down that hourly rate. And I've told people this before where they are trying to be like, well, what if you do it this time? I was like, look, if you want to feel better about like breaking this up into an hourly thing, cool. This can take 3 months and I will spend this amount of hours on it, and it'll take that much time for you to feel comfortable about like the hourly rate of it. Or you just pay the rate and it'll be done, like in a few weeks. But understanding like that it's not a time thing, it's a value thing, now is going to help you kind of like craft your journey better and not get stuck in this like, I can make $20 an hour, I can make 30 hours or $30 an hour, right? It's really comes down, especially if you're like freelancing, because like obviously if you work somewhere there's an hourly rate, but even negotiating contracts, like this falls into that. But if you're freelancing, like very much so, the thought of like the value of what you're creating, the end product versus the time it takes is huge. And then design and entrepreneurship. This is a fun one. I love talking about this because I think it's very much overlooked by a lot of designers, because we equate kind of what we do with the thing that we make, and we make this product and we design it, and that's it, and that's all there is to it. But the reality is there's so much more that you can like expand into with design. I love design so much because of the fact that it's always changing, and you can work kind of everywhere with design. When I talk, especially to like groups younger than this, like high school and that, it's one of those things where if you're considering a creative path, and you like other things, merge them, right? If you're really into music, you want to produce and be in the music scene, I'll tell you right now, you'll spend a lot more time in the music industry doing the creative work with it than just having to like, just all I can do is like be a successful artist, right? Or in sports, like there's sports I love. There's certain things I was not born with. Height is one of them. So as much as I really want to play NBA basketball, I'm never playing in the NBA, right? However, I can work on stuff and be a part of like that field. There's so many avenues with design, and pairing it with something else that you love, that you can actually like have a career in the area that you're passionate about, without having to like do that one thing. And I'll tell you right now, like being a creative in those industries, with how fast trends and other things cycle, you're probably going to have a much longer career than an artist or a player or something like that. Time and equity, right? So I talked about the value of that. Equity is like another thing with design and creative services that you can actually build and trade for, right? I think it's like usually we have creative and then business schools, right? Kind of separate. There's not a lot of merging. I had to learn a lot of it just by doing, and then I've learned over the last 5-6 years, like, oh wow, there's a lot of things that we offer people that we can trade for ownership in things, because people need solution, strategy, like forward thinking. It's not just, well, how am I ever going to trade my brochure or poster for equity in a company, right? That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about the end result of that thing. Design thinking and problem solving that you're all learning here is going to be applied in so many different ways that like you can't even fully think of until like you start hitting those situations. I've consulted now in boardrooms like with large multi-million-dollar companies on things that aren't just design, by just applying the creative process to solving a problem they have, right? Because you see things differently. So we're all being like trained to do. You look at something and you're like, oh, this is what it can be, right? Well, that same thinking goes outside of the art portion of stuff, right? So learning all the stuff that you're doing currently and building process, procedures, creative like strategy is going to like be able to be applied to so many other things in business. And that's something that is a value. People will trade you equity in a company for, if you want to negotiate that, you can offer stuff, you can help people start something, you can find a slot in somewhere that normally would be passed over and no one would think, oh, let's bring in a designer to fill this slot. It's surprising how many people don't know what they're doing and are in these roles outside of creative. So and I've experienced it firsthand. I've been able to trade it, in equity in multiple companies now, based off of just design thinking and coming through this program. We were told actually when we were starting our agency and had this idea of like, oh yeah, well, we're planning on building the machine of this agency and then trading things for equity. And people told us like, well, no one does that. That's not something designers get. You don't get equity. You have to be like, it's like CFO or something like that offering. We're like, well, we think we can. And I'll tell you right now, people want the brains and the way that everyone thinks and looks at stuff in here. They're going to need it more and more with all the new technologies coming out. So, when I set it down too fast, that's it. So all that to say, the main thing at the end of the day, though, with talking about how you sell your services, time versus the value, all these things, the biggest point I think it all comes down to at the end of the day is finding something that you're actually passionate about. I'll guarantee you right now, anything that you go into and you work on, you're spending hours and gifting pieces of your life away to something. You're not going to do it the same way you would if you're driven and passionate about, right? You're just, it's really easy, especially with creative work, to get caught in like this monotony of, day in, day out, make this, make that. The thing that's going to set you apart and make you like really like be hungry and be willing to put in the time and work that it takes to, kind of find and craft a successful path is doing something you're passionate about. And I can't tell any one of you in this room like what that is, and no one else should, because it's your passion, right? And if you feel very strongly about something and have something that you're really into that, keeps you up at night thinking about it, gets you out of bed thinking about it in the morning, that's what you should go after. Because you're going to put more effort, more energy, more work into being successful in that thing than anything else that you're going to work on. And even if it's not the safe thing or whatever it is, in the long run of it, you're not going to burn out doing something that you love every day. Other piece of that, what's the lifestyle you want? I think that's like a question that like most people don't get asked or think about when they're crafting like their career. I'm personally someone who's never going to like talk down on someone else's design path or decision in their life, because I don't know what they actually want out of life. I think traditionally there's been, talks or thought of like, oh, this is like the design, this is like the successful design path, this is the cool design path to go on. And if you go this route, that's not really like the good one to go. We hear a lot about it with like state work, right? State design jobs. Here's the thing on that. If you want to go work in like small boutique agencies or freelance or any of that, you're gonna spend a lot of time just working all the time and grinding and like spending those extra hours, because that's what it takes. And guess what? If you're that type of person and you just like love that, like diving into something and figuring out everything about it and have that like fixation on the thing and you can just go, that's perfect for you. If you're someone who you enjoy design, you want to work on design projects, you want to create stuff, but you also want to have, nights and weekends, family, those other things, then find a job or find a career that allows you to have that, and don't let anyone else like talk down that you're not successful as a designer because you took like this path and not this path. At the end of the day, like when you get done with your career and lying on that deathbed, no one's going to be there to be like, you didn't take that path, how do you feel now, right? You're going to be sitting there going, oh man, I dedicated X amount of hours of my life to this thing. Was I happy doing it? Was I able to do those other things in life that I wanted to do? And that's really what matters at the end of it. Also, too, like everyone's lifestyle is different at where they're at, regardless of like if you're taking care of a family member, if you have multiple jobs, if you have other responsibilities, right? I think sometimes we listen to like career paths where people talk about like, this is what you have to do. This is what it takes. Do this. Drop out of school. Quit this thing. Quit your job. Just do this. That doesn't just work for everyone, right? I think, we all have things that, are in our life. It's like, oh, wow, like I'm fortunate I don't have to worry about this thing, but that's not the same for everyone. And so what you need to do is like assess the things that you have responsibilities for in your life, and then find a way to kind of like work in, where you want to go, your trajectory into that. Don't feel like you have to abandon, these other things that are important to you or people in your life. Oh, no. Touched it. Because someone said this is like what it takes to like do this thing, or, if you're not doing this by this time, you're done. Like I said, I went back to school at 27 and got my degree here. I was scouted by a tech company, went and worked there for a little bit in between the engineering design department, because I like coding too, like creating systems so they could talk to each other, because engineers and designers in tech don't speak the same language. They do, they just say it slightly differently. You can just like kind of run that Google translation for them on like, you're both saying the same thing, you just got to say it slightly different. It's great. Saw a bunch of toxic stuff in that workplace and watched them clear out different departments. And then when it came time, they did a whole other shift, like cleared out my department. And, from then I was like, cool, I'm not going to let anyone dictate, my employment based off like good work I'm doing and just because a new manager came in. So started YVG. Blindly, we didn't have any funding, nothing like that. Just, my friends and I who have been doing stuff for many years in Sacramento in the creative space, throwing warehouse rigs and stuff like that. Being like, hey, we keep talking about these things in the city that are happening that we're like, why they do that? Like, why they name that this way? Oh, the branding on this side could have been better. It doesn't speak to that area, right? And then we were fortunately self-aware enough to say, cool, but what are we doing to contribute to that, right? Like no one's ever gonna walk up to you on the street and say, hey, looks like you got good ideas. You want to be in charge of this new project, right? You have to earn your seat at that table by doing stuff. And, it's an uphill battle, but, we just decided that we didn't want to have like a sideline seat to it. And we would rather work to like contribute and do stuff like our way, and then hopefully get that seat eventually. And we have, which is still crazy at times. I'm like, oh, wow, like we're talking to this person. That's awesome. But it really just, that was our passion. Like we just wanted to, we grew up here. We were the few in the early 2000s that graduated high school that were like, we're staying. I like it here. And that time everyone was like, you can't make it. You can't do anything in Sacramento. And we were like, well, we want to try. And we want like, I've said, John certainly said it plenty of times, our biggest export in Sacramento is talent. We have so much talent here in so many different areas, and everyone just feels like they have to go somewhere else to showcase that talent. So we wanted to contribute to the community to see things that we wanted to see come to fruition, and also like do it to kind of show that, hey, like you can You can't make it here. You can't do it here. But with that, it's going to take time, and be nice to yourself through the process. You know, I remember talking to someone, and I think Mario in one of the talks was the one that was like, and he just graduated 3 years ago, like a couple years ago. And I was like, wait, hold on. Let me just define it. One, I'm not like 24, you know, at the time, like, and it didn't just take, like, it's not like I just went through school and then started a company and did this. I've been doing stuff, you know, just creatively throwing events, all these things with some of the same people that are now my partners today since I was 19. So, you know, like 16 years, you know. And it wasn't until really like these last kind of like 4, and I had our agency for 5, right? And everyone's like, man, it's so crazy, like how fast everything's happening for you guys. And we're just kind of like, fast? Like we're just, you know what I mean? Like for us, we see the timeline as, you know, the last like 16 years of we've been doing stuff. And, you know, it's chipping away, and, you know, everything kind of goes like this. You know, you spend that time and everyone just gets to see like the success and the end happening. And a lot of people like to kind of revel in that and like be like, oh yeah, you know, just happened 5 years. Like I'll be the first one to tell you, like, it takes time. Everyone that I know that is at a place that a lot of people like look to have been doing something for a very long time and sharpening their tools. And, you know, what they say about luck is where preparation meets opportunity, right? So it's not a coincidence. Things, you know, happen, but if you're not prepared to recognize opportunity when it happens or becomes available to you, you're going to miss it. And so it's that preparation and that spending time getting to that point to recognize the opportunity and just know that, you know, you're working towards something. Instant gratification in social media right now, I think it's been like a detriment to a lot of people in the creative world, because you see a lot of just curated, like, wow, that's so good. And someone's like, oh yeah, you know, it's a time-lapse video, so it makes it look even faster. But you don't know a lot of different elements behind the scenes, right? How long that person's been doing that. Is that person making money doing it? You know, I think a lot of the creative work is great. And I have so many saved folders from Instagram and different, you know, TikTok and stuff of tutorials and cool stuff. However, there's a lot of these people and creatives that what they're making is all their own personal work. And that's great, but it's a very specific one style. They've defined it, they've been able to do it, but are they like getting contracted paid work in design? And you could look at something and look at numbers and be like, that's success. But then someone, you know, who isn't popular in there is actually, you know, doing very well in the creative world, and you just don't know it. So I think the whole seeing something, feeling like it's like happening now, or this person did it so quick, or if I got it all figured out by the time I'm 23, like my life's over and I'm not going to have a career, that's BS. You know, like the great thing about design is some of my personal design heroes, you know, were going into the studio in their 80s. Now they weren't taking calls and at the computer doing stuff, but they just loved what they did and they wanted to just be around the energy and the younger energy and that. And they were just going in every day. I mean, what Hilton Blazer is going into his 88 or something like that. And so I look at that, I'm like, this is so cool because we have a career that you can do, I mean, your entire life, you know. And for me personally, you know, I think we all go through that phase of like constantly seeing stuff that we want to be making that we're not quite there. Successful design career. It doesn't have to just happen. I know there's a lot of people with a tagline of creative director at 22 years old in their bios and stuff, but the reality is like a lot of these things come from classic trade industries, right? It's not so much about this title, it's the time spent to be able to understand, recognize problems, teach people, lead a team, all these other things that there's no shortcut for it. You can't just, line jump and get, watch the tutorial for the life experience to get there. And I've kind of gotten to this point in my life where I see what I'm making now, see what I was making 5 years ago, what I was making 10 years ago. I don't visit those folders very much. But I get excited for like, what am I going to be making, at 45? What am I going to be making at 55? Because I'm learning new stuff all the time. I'm constantly finding videos of something in Illustrator, and I'm like, how have I been using this program for this long and I didn't know there's that feature, right? And that's okay. Like, there's no shame in not knowing something creative, or, hey, I just learned about this. Cool, that's awesome. It's not like you're too late, or everyone's knowing how to keyframe stuff in After Effects like that. You're the last one, right? It's like, whatever. It's all tools. These are all just tools that help you on your journey of finding your passion, the life and design that you want. And, ultimately, that's what you should land on. No one's got the blueprint. I'm never going to stand in front of a talk and say, all right, this is what everyone has to do. Do this, then this, then this, and you'll get here. Because it just won't happen. Everyone's got a different situation. Everyone's got something unique about themselves they bring to the table that can define their path. And that's just what you got to focus on discovering and go after, full steam. And, you'll be fine. I guarantee it. It's going to take time. And that's the one thing, like, I just want to say, it doesn't have to take time in the sense of like, yeah, you just got to 25/8, hustle, grind, no sleep. Like, no, you don't have to do that to be successful either. You just have to find stuff that interests you in the creative world and stuff you're passionate about. And that's going to be the thing that gets you up every morning and keep you curious and discovering and searching for more in it. So, yeah. I normally at the beginning say like, hey, stop me anytime to ask questions along the way. And I forgot, ADHD. So that was a lot. But a couple things. One, I will take any questions you guys have. Like I've said, I have nonstop open book syndrome. So any question you have about anything, business, design, personal, I'm open. So don't feel like, oh, I don't know, this is appropriate to ask him. I'm pretty open. Also, if you're one of those people who don't like to ask stuff in front of people, that's my info. That's my actual email that I live in essentially at this point. So just hit me up. But yeah, I'll open up the floor. Awesome. I'm just gonna go this way.
I really like what you said about doing what you like and finding something within what you like. And I was just wondering, what would be the first step or first steps you would take to go into that? So, just for example, I really want to go into maybe perfume design or music on the cover type thing.
Yeah.
So what would we say is the first steps?
The very first steps of that, or
yeah. What would you start?
I would say, we'll just say music covers. My brain just went a million different ways. So that's looking the perfume stuff. It's really cool. So for music album stuff, right? So there's a few things. One, you don't have to wait till you graduate to start working on stuff. That's the big secret. I'm just gonna tell you guys right now, you're all designers. The piece of paper doesn't make you now you just wake up the next morning. Oh yeah, now I can make money doing this. No, you have skill set and people are at all different levels for stuff. You can start doing that right now. For album covers, if you're passionate about making them, I would just do mock concept. Go pick your top 5 albums ever made and design it in a style that a reimagine. This was dope, but this is how I would do that. This is when I listen to this album, this is what inspires me, right? And just start making stuff and put it out there. That's something that's in this day and age is so crazy. It's like you can get hit up by stuff. Like you don't know. You put out a concept piece and someone's like, oh, that's dope. Come work on this thing, right? But also too, like I think it helps, you get an understanding of like as you start making them, like you'll discover things and it's going to help your design get better because it's one of those things where sometimes like what we can do and what we want to do creatively like doesn't, the ideas in the head don't match the output yet. Finding like a project and a body of work or something to do is going to help you discover like those pieces to get better. And so if there's something that you're passionate about, like album covers or perfume, right? I think of like that instantly is going to help you with layout, grid, composition for album covers, 3D design for perfume stuff. Great thing. The program Blender is free, open source, and there's so many tutorials online about and yeah, Blender, it's free. And you can go on there on YouTube or different like forums online and I just went down a rabbit hole with bottles of perfume and stuff, so I know. There's great videos of people like how to design like 3D renderings of perfume bottles. But those things like just by doing, you're going to like learn stuff that's going to help progress your design creativity because it's really hard to just sit down in front of like a blank file and go make something, right? Like, no, it never happens. Like, it always comes from a place of like, I'm very interested in this thing. I even personally like do that because, day in, day out, I'm less on the computer designing and more dealing with like other things. I still design because that's my rule is I will die before I'm not doing any design. But when times like get busy or I'm doing more like client management or like sourcing or having to travel for work and stuff, I'll make projects for myself to get that creative like excitement going. I did a personal poster series recently where I gave myself 1 hour, and the thing was take a like style of design and then flip a poster for an anime I liked. And so I did different styles of design, like Art Nouveau, Blue Note jazz covers, like things like that, and then took animes that I enjoyed, like I did a Cowboy Bebop for a Blue Note jazz one, and did like a kaiju Japanese monster movie poster for Naruto and stuff like that. Art Nouveau for Misa and Death Note. But I had to do that for me because I still like sitting down and just, it's design is like a muscle, right? And if you aren't doing stuff creatively, it starts to get a little loose up there and you go sit down and do something like, anchor point pen tool, what overlay do I like? What was, and so I'll make stuff for myself that just kind of like, I'm going to be excited about it because like I've set this parameter, this is what I got to do. And it's things I'm interested in. And then I start doing it. And then all of a sudden I learn a bunch of new stuff that then when I go back to like a client project or something, I'm like, oh yeah, that thing I did, I hardly ever illustrate. I forced myself to illustrate. It came out good. I felt better about illustrating for something else, So I would say, just pick top 5 albums in your mind, and then just do a reimagining, and then Blender for 3D. And that's a great one to be looking into now because 3D and renderings and stuff like that, how accessible they've gotten and integrating into other stuff. So it's very sought after currently, so it's a good one.
I'm really curious about sort of the business side of things, and so I'm curious what were the steps that you took in creating this creative agency for yourself? What roles were needed and my clients?
Yeah, that's a great one. Well, I'm still positioning for Sac State, just giving an honorary MBA at this point, so I'll never go back to school to get that. So the first thing to think about, especially when starting a creative agency, is if you start it with multiple people and they're all designers, you might as well just pull straws and who's not going to design anymore. because there's so much other things to a business on the day-to-day running that, you know, someone has to have that focus. So fortunately for me and my partners, you know, I was bringing the creative, my portfolio, design, connections, networks, and then my main partner, Sean, he had worked in marketing. He, you know, dabbles in design himself, but he worked in marketing, did a bunch of stuff for DeMarcus Cousins when he was here for the Kings, had, you know, connections and network, but he's one of those people who's like really good at like the sell and like saying this is how much something is and like that's it. Whereas like as creatives, I think we all have gotten a lot better at it, but kind of like do that self-doubt on like, I don't know. It only takes me like this much to do it. I should only charge this much. And my partner Sean was like, that's this much. And I'd be like, who's gonna pay that? And then we do it, and they're like, here you go. I'm like, oh shit, like they did, we got it, right? And so like having some, you know, like someone that like has that more kind of like outspoken, like, you know, hubris for those things, and not like, you know, blind, ignorant confidence, right? Where it's like he's just sees something else, you know, that like in, you know, like he saw what we were doing, and he's like, I know this is the value of it. And then our other partner, you know, really likes spreadsheets. So like it was great because that's all back end stuff. So one, it's really easy to get a business license. You can do LLCs. I usually recommend people starting out their business to just like don't do that from the jump because it's like way more expensive a year. You're usually not doing anything at like an entry level freelance where you need the facilities of an LLC. A DBA is fine and it's super easy to get. Like, I mean, there's LegalZoom, all these things. It's, I think, like maybe a couple $100 to do. And you pick a fictitious business name, put it in there. It puts out the ad in the paper for you, does all the things, and now you have a business license, right? So it's really easy to do that. If you do want to be doing freelance work, I would highly recommend first step, like just doing a DBA and like getting that going. Like if you're doing kind of work and it's like for a trade and you're like dabbling in it, you don't really have to worry about it. But as soon as you want to start charging people money for it, there's this thing that we all have to contribute to that sucks, taxes. By having a business, it allows you to write stuff off, you know, like income, show an income, actually like plan for taxes. So that's one thing they'll sneak up on you. I've seen a lot of freelancers get in trouble, not to their accord of them embezzling money, but just not realizing like what you have to put away. I mean, for us, you know, we have an account that literally every job that comes in, we just put away the amount that's suggested for us to put away into taxes, and it's high. And at the end of the year, every year so far, we get some of it back because we are like being very conservative and making sure you always want to have more than less. And it's just one of those things, right? Like thinking about all the other business aspects of it. But the DBA is like super easy. And then you can get like QuickBooks, like light for like free starting out to just like run your P&Ls, your profits and losses and stuff. It's really easy to do like at a small scale. So I always recommend like just start, just like do it while you have like one job, two jobs, because then at least you're like getting the ins and outs of it. And it's not like having to scramble to learn it when you have more coming in, right? If there's low stakes involved, it's the best time to learn something new, right? And you're just like, oh, cool, yeah, I have this job, you know, I'm just gonna run it through this, you know, and run the numbers and stuff like that, figure out my taxes. Understanding that early on, it's gonna save you a lot of headache later. And then, you know, just going out, and then if you're wanting to pull work, just like put feelers out there. One thing I will say about creative work is there's it's a big difference. Sometimes it seems like a skewed line between work that's going to progress you upwards and spec work, right? And I think spec work and like doing stuff for free, like it's kind of merged into this like conversation online where you're like, now people have this like attitude where it's like, I'm not doing anything for less than this, right? Like if I'm doing design, like I should be making it like 6 figures, like out the gate. Like I won't even post how much you like you're gonna pay online, or I'm not even gonna look at it, right? And they have like 1 year of experience, and and they're like, oh, I'm not doing anything for free. I'm not saying like go out and like let people take advantage of you and use your work for free, but there's levels to it, right? If you don't have a portfolio or no one's knocking on your door saying, hey, can I give you money for what you do? You can jumpstart that by going and finding opportunities where you have full creative control over the project. And that's the trade-off for the little or no pay for it, right? And a great one is different organizations that are positively impacting the world that you see that need help with stuff, right? Like if you're really into some sort of like conservation or nonprofits, there we go. Yeah, any nonprofits, not for profits, like, any space that you see, like most of those places don't have money to hire marketing and creative, but they also don't really know what they're doing wrong and are very excited for anything. And so you can come in and be like, hey, like, I'm a designer. I'm trying to get, some projects under my belt. Like I'm really passionate about, animal shelters. I would love to do a flyer for an upcoming event that you have. What do you have on the calendar? Is there a budget? And that's a question that don't be scared to ask. Like, is there a budget and what the budget is? Like, it's not something where we're playing this, like, I'm going to write 2 numbers on a card. And if you pick the wrong one, like, you're not getting hired. People just don't ask. And, I think that's it. The counterpoint you can make sometimes is, if they're like, well, why do you need to know how much, it is? Because then you're going to charge me that amount. It's not so much I'm going to charge you that amount, but if I have an idea for something that might be cool and I understand you have a budget for it, we might be able to like make additional things, right? Like, hey, I really want a poster, but you have a budget. I can actually, with that budget, take this much for my services, and we can do like stickers, sign you up on a QR code account, and this, right? Like, the more ways that you can find like creative solutions for like stuff they're not thinking about, that's going to get you paid, because they're like, oh, dang, like that backfired. Like now I want to do those things. I can't, when you tell someone a great idea, they can't unhear it, right? Which is, be careful with that too, right? Like make sure there's certain things that you're like, I have this idea, but we got to see like if it'll work into the budget, and then give them a great idea when stuff's signed. But yeah, like you can just start, going after those things, and those can turn into like actual jobs. You do a couple things, and then you notice like, hey, like I did this flyer, but when I dropped them off, I noticed like you guys' business cards are like not there. With some of the illustrations I made for this thing, why don't we pump this up? Or it's all great stuff. And there's this funny thing about good design work. It doesn't matter where, when you made it in your life, you can show it as a piece of your portfolio. John knows when we started the agency, half the projects in there were my school projects. I didn't say, oh, and this one's in college that I made this. This was a concept that didn't get selected, and no one was ever like, was that in school, right? It was like, oh man, that would have been cool, right? It's the thinking behind it. And that's not like the fake it till you make it thing. It's actual work, right? So you don't need to like label like, oh, sorry guys, this one was like the work you're doing in here, and the time you have, and I know what the professors stress here, the thinking to put into these projects is the equivalent of like doing these in real life, right? You just have way more time to do the project than you ever will in real life. So that's like one thing to think about. Like,
Can you repeat that? Doesn't feel it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, trust me. as someone who went through the program, I fully know, but the reality is when you're out there in the world, you will never get as much time to concept and like think through the project as you will like while you're here now. So like take advantage of that, throw stuff at the wall. Forrest is in this talk, so I'm gonna say something that's not, I mean, it's not against anything, but don't look at your projects and what you're doing trying to get A. Every project that you have, think about the end result of that and how you can use it when you're out of this program, right? It's not about that letter and if you go into each of your projects thinking about how will this reflect like for what I want to accomplish later in my design career? Can I use this in my portfolio? If I showed someone this, would they be, you know, like tricked into thinking it was like a paid project? And if you approach all the projects with like that mentality, you're gonna get an A. Because like that's the big secret they're looking for, right? Is like the thought, the intention, all that behind the design work is what your projects like are actually doing great of. It's not like, does Forrest like this illustration? Or like, does he think this poster is cool? You know, it's the thought behind it. And so I would say like take advantage of this time in here. And use it to, you know, the concepting time that you have to process Finder and do all that, do it. Because I was not a fan of process binders. I made this crazy one for Gwen when I had her class, and this process binder ended up going on my final table for spring show because of like the thought and like I was bound and everything because of like at the end of that project, I realized what she was actually having us do and the thought and strategy that went into that. When I when I came into interview for the tech job, I didn't bring in code or websites or any of that stuff. I brought that process manual and they looked through it and they were like, yeah, okay. It wasn't like, oh, like, let's see your designs. It was like, I literally brought that because I knew what they were looking for. They were looking for someone who had attention to detail, who could solve unique problems, and they wanted to see how they thought through it. And I was like, oh, crazy, I have this thing that I made. And so it wasn't until like that class, because I looked through my pre-design process manuals and stuff, and I'm sure some of you have the same approach that I did at the time, where it was like the reverse engineering process binder, where you weren't really doing the process binder to get to the end process. You go back and fill in. So, you know, you're like, oh, I got to here. I didn't really do it along the way. So, yep, and that's how I got here, right? Those projects, when I look at them compared to the ones where I actually like did the steps along the way, night and day. Those ones look like school projects, right? The ones where I took the time and actually like did the process and, you know, showed that what the end result was, it's like, oh my God, like that's what you're supposed to be doing. So that's super important. Gwen had us all thinking we were going to die our senior year. And in the sense of the other cohort who didn't have her, by the time we were probably 3, 4 weeks out from spring show, and we were still concepting. And the other cohort was already graphics, illustration, like food truck wraps, like all these things. And we were coming in each day and finding connections between the cultures and what our events were. And we were all like, this is insane. I'm not going to be able to like make something. And then when it came time to make it, everything that snapped together for our cohort, when you looked at them side by side, like not to say the graphics or the weren't good on the other side, but the difference in like the thought behind the end result, and it was the same project, night and day. And it was like the moment of, I guess I have to think now, how many people have seen Karate Kid? Wax on, right? The whole like, what am I doing? And then you go and all of a sudden you go to get the fight and you're like, oh, I get it. These things I'm doing apply to something, right? That was that class. So, and that was what really like got me like understanding, you know, some of the importance of those things. So
Yes, I have a question from the chat. It said,
what's up, Chad?
What's up, Chad?
They said, hi, I'm Nathan, a freelance graphic designer with almost 6 years of experience, mainly working with small businesses. I want to know how to get work with larger companies and get more long-term clients. Should I intern or work at a design firm, or should I focus on growing my own business? What's the best way?
Currently freelancing, has experience, wants larger clients and longer contracts.
Long-term clients.
Yeah.
And like,
That's a really good one. So I can't I'll give you kind of what we did, or then like how we approached those and how we moved from kind of like smaller to the larger ones. Like I said, everything is different, but one thing I would say is the approach and the type of work that you're taking on for your freelance. Do the work you want to attract. If you're doing, it's really hard to get out of the bubble that you're perceived in creative work, especially like at a local level, right? Like if you're doing certain type of work for small businesses and you're constantly doing that work and your rates are that same, amount, potentially those clients are if you're getting new clients kind of off the recommendations of like those other ones, the businesses are probably talking. I mean, like, oh yeah, I know a guy that charges this much, like hit him up, right? That's going to kind of keep you at that level. I would say, one way to always kind of like increase rates is find another way of, or another like type of like service that you can like offer, right? Like say you're just being hired to do this specific thing, look at the different businesses and try to find like a pain point and that you can like offer, like, hey, I noticed like you guys don't have X, right? Like if I were to, design this, or if I were to like take on, your social or do whatever, right? Like, would that be something you would be interested in? And they're like, yeah, that sounds good. They're like, awesome. So, you're currently getting me at this rate. To add that on, it would bump into that. Are we still good? Awesome. If not, you can explore a little bit more about like why, like, do you have a budget for that? Like, do you see this as value as bringing revenue into your company? But for long-term, like retainer, right? That's where things get like interesting because you can kind of craft that however you want. The whole point of a retainer is guaranteed work and guaranteed income, so you can plan accordingly for long-term. And yes, you like are more like at like an on-call, like if they need something, you can do it. Also, contracts, very important. Scope of works, very important, because you can define what you can have asked to be and what you can't. A retainer, just so everyone is clear in here, a retainer does not mean they own your soul. They can ask whatever they want at any time. That's where the contract comes into play, right? You have a scope of work. You have your contract that says, this is what I'm offering you for this service. And if they come in and are like, do this, you're like, that sounds exciting. I'm really happy that you have something else that we can work on. Currently we're not handling that, but lucky for you, I got time to take that on. We just need to amend the contract and add this on, right? Always like lead with like, not like, now they want this, right? It's like, awesome. That's an opportunity, right? Like, sounds like you want more. But with retainers, the whole purpose of that is you now have a contract that says they will pay you for this amount of time consistently. And so you can plan growth accordingly for it. For teams, it's really important. Like, we kind of at this point have we make exceptions here and there. Like for like an epic game, we'll say, yes, we'll do 1 year and not 2 years because we want that work. But we kind of have a 2-year minimum on our retainers at this point for YBG. And it's because I have a staff of 9 that have salaries, benefits, 401ks, like these things that we have to pay for, right? And if we're going to take on work, like I can't have a client that comes on and it's like, yeah, I'm all in, great. We plan, expand, get the team focused on this stuff. don't take other opportunities, and then a month in, they're like, awesome, got everything I needed, see ya, right? So we have like minimum time limits, but we also are very selective on who we take on for a retainer, because it is like a relationship where you're saying, I will allocate this time to you, and you know, you get this out of it. So with a retainer or trying to find long-term clients, what you can do is, you know, either financially show the break, right? Like, hey, a la carte, if you want me to keep doing these things, which it seems like you do, it would be like this much. However, if we get on a retainer and I added this service as well, you know, can we have a retainer where here's the scope of service, this is what I'll do for you, but, you know, we get on a 6-month thing, right? That will allow Nathan, that'll allow Nathan to now say, I have guaranteed this amount of income from this area coming in. I've allocated this much time and resources of me, the freelancer, to this. So consistent work is great because you can get better and faster at it, and you can do it whenever like it needs to be done. So that can open up time that you're worried about finding other work, you know, having these one-off jobs that you're like getting taken out of like larger perspective thinking to go handle. And you can just like say like, cool, this is set. Now, like I have enough time to take on someone else, right? These things compound too. Then you got the confidence and you have the contract. So going to someone else the next time, it gets easier and you can charge more. And it's easier, you can charge more. I'll tell you right now, the first time we charged $10,000 for something was the first time we charged $10,000 for something. First time we, you know, over $100,000 contract was the first time it was, you know, it's not like you build, like you kind of ramp and you're throwing something at the wall, right? And you're coming at it with data, confidence from the successes. And that's what leads to like that growth and expansion. So finding those larger contracts is, you know, defining the work that you want to be doing and who fits in that bucket as well. Because just saying you want to have bigger clients is not specific enough. The year we got Epic Games at our owner summit, Sean and I defined different categories of areas we wanted to expand in for that year for creative, and video games was one of them. I play a lot of Fortnite. You play a lot of Fortnite. And been playing video games my whole life. Love video games. And we're like, that would be cool. Got Epic Games, you know, but we define like what we want to do in the space. It wasn't like, yeah, like it'd be great to get, you know, like a national like size. It was like very specific. And then we had someone that we knew that was internal, created the conversation. I actually spent 6 months essentially giving free game to Epic on like negotiation calls before we signed the contract, because by that time we had built a rapport and trust. So when it came time to like sign the contract, it was almost like they're like, well, we can't now leave because all this sounds really good and we want to do it. So yep, you know, but it was like that give ask, right? So I think having Nathan, like, if you want to expand into like larger clients, what are they? Define like who it is, right? If you're working with like, say, mom and pop like restaurants, like I want to work with, you know, a Michelin star restaurant. I want to work with like a multi-chain restaurant. If you don't want to get completely out of that, like where do you want to make that jump to? And then that way, like the more you define things, the more specific you are with the work you want to do, the easier it is to accomplish it, right? It's kind of like a checklist. You know, I personally go through notebooks like no tomorrow, because if I don't write it down, it doesn't exist. My ADHD is too bad. And I have to, like, I literally been bullet journaling for 9 years and like teach it now. And I love it because it works however I want to modify stuff. But the whole point is I write stuff down and I write a lot, because that way it lives somewhere. you have your tasks out, you can see it, you get that little endorphin hit when you check something off and it's complete, but you can carry it over. So defining what you're doing, writing it out, having a plan gives you like the roadmap to execute it, right? Like say you want to book a trip, like saying like, I want to go here. Cool. How, when, what flight, time of year, what, you know what I mean? You don't like book a trip by just going to the airport and then like, right? You plan it and you like have your checklist. You have the things you're going to do. Business is the same way. You just need to define what you want to be doing and create kind of like the steps to get there, and you will. I'll tell you right now, the number one, well, I won't say number one because I don't have any data to say that, but one of the big reasons that people don't get the work that they want to do or stay in the bubble and do it is because they don't actually spend the time to write out how to get to the next step. They say, I want to. It'd be great if only, but there's no action plan, right? And there's no steps to even start. You know, you just got to think about it like, I don't know how many people code, but like writing a computer program, like you can't just tell it, right? It's steps, every step. And out, fingers open, right? Like be as detailed as possible, and I guarantee like so much of the stuff that you guys want to like do, get done, accomplish with a game plan. And it, that game plan, you can have that game plan. You can have it for in 5 years. I want to do this. 1 year, 6 months, next week. Mine, I have my dailies, I have my monthlies, I have these, right? But you have to like have that plan for you to follow, or you're just kind of floating, and hoping you bump into like the right thing. So more detail is better. Create like your own, game plan scenario.
That's great.
Yeah. Anyone else? Anyone? Don't be shy.
So if you were to start today, let us say you had, like, you don't have anything, you're at square one, right? How would you start as a freelancing graphic designer?
So funny about this, I fantasize about this now. I think you get to a point when you do something of like I don't know. I'm like, if it all burned down tomorrow, like how fast could I do it again? But it's kind of like the process of doing it. Like you learn so much along the way that when you look back, you're like, oh man. So if like I had to start over tomorrow, first thing I would do is like define the stuff I want to work on. Like I think when I started out freelancing, because when I was freelancing when I had enough design knowledge to be dangerous, but I wasn't good, I guess is a good way to put it. Like I understood it enough and like had like an eye for, visually and be like, oh, this is cool. And just like looking at stuff slightly different. I contribute a lot of that to skateboarding my entire life. Like we look at things and that's not stairs. That's like, oh, I can jump down that, right? So just a different perspective on things. But I wasn't good. Like I look at stuff that I was paid for. I was like, shit, like that typeset is terrible. Like there's no good salt principles here at all. But it didn't matter because the idea was good, right? And so I think knowing now, like how to get to the level I'm at now, like I would just be like, okay, cool. What is it I want to work on, right? I really love what's possible right now with like 3D, like AR, like all this stuff, because I think it's really great storytelling. I'm a big fan, like I said, video games, tabletop, pen and paper games, Dungeons and Dragons, that type of stuff. But it's always because I love like storytelling, right? I love like the adventure and like the imagining worlds and like, that's how I approach apparel collections essentially now. It's like I'll build stories for like a world and I can see and I can like zoom into that world like, oh, this is a cool thing. So it's like world building for me. So, I would be like, oh, cool. Like, how would I go about doing that? And then spend time like, because I now have that time, right, to like focus attention to like learning something. So I would probably like dive a lot more into, you know, Cinema, 4D, Blender, After Effects, like some of the new AR technologies that like Apple's putting out in their developer tools that you can like use for free and stuff. Unreal Engine, free for now. I think there'll be a tier that'll still be free, but I mean, there's so many resources out there now that like weren't around when I first started designing. Yeah, there was YouTube, but it wasn't the YouTube that we have now where it actually showed you decent videos. I mean, Adobe builds tools into like tutorials into their stuff now. So I would, you know, first spend the time, you know, like defining like what it is that I wanted to work on. And then, you know, go start like creating just some personal projects around it. Why I got kind of like an understanding of like what that industry looks like, right? So I think that's something else that's important too, is there's not just like one way in any industry, right? Like you start, the more you get into something, it's like the whole Dunning-Kruger effect, right? The most confident you'll ever be at something is when you have just enough knowledge of it that you don't know like all the hard things about it. Unfortunately, a lot of people stay there and get opinionated. But once you learn something, and we all went through this with design, right? Like you started designing, you opened up Illustrator, you got down with pen tool, learned some transparency math stuff and Photoshop, and you're like, all right, got this. And then you like actually got into it and you're like, oh, there's so much more. Like I don't know anything about design. And then you slowly start coming back up. And then you're never back up here, but you start to like build that knowledge. Also, that little voice in the back of your head, the self-deprecating one that's like not good enough, not good enough, not good enough. That doesn't go away. You don't wake up one morning after years of design and be like, it's gone. You just have more wins to stack against that voice. So then when it perks up, you're like, all right, I suck, moving on, right? So yeah, defining like what is I want to work on and spending the time to know it, and then just explore that area and be like, okay, cool. So in this realm of like 3D, there's like industrial design, right? Do I want to build for like the glassware for perfume bottles? Do I want to like, you know, make character modeling? Do I want to do concept illustration? Like start to find what those different areas are in that macro thing I'm interested in, and then go in and then, I mean, start looking at like different places, you know, like locally that I see that I'd be like, hey, I can do this. Looks like you guys put out videos on like social. Looks like you, when I walk into your whatever, you have screens playing stuff. Like, who does them? You guys do them? Do you not have them? Have you wanted to do them? Like, well, I could do them. So I can do like 3 videos for you a month. This many, this long, it'll be this much, right? And like just kind of start finding those like initial areas where I can like insert myself and my expertise into something that someone hasn't thought about or wants to do, but they don't know how. You can feed them to the punch. But when you can offer someone something that they want, but they don't know how to get, you're hired. Because they aren't even thinking about it. They're like, oh man, I really want this thing. I just have no idea where to go to get someone to do it. And they're like, hey, you can do it. And then just kind of building up from there. Get some under your belt. Start continue posting stuff like on your own personal, whether it's a website, whether it's Instagram. I go back and forth on it now. Like it really, however you want to get your work out in the world, that's the best way to do it. We didn't have a website forever for YBG. It was like our Instagram, and then we finally made it. We've made it more because Robbie and I like really want to build a website from scratch using like Vue.js, like and do these certain things. So like it was more of like a, you think we could do this? And then we did, and we hardly updated because it's such a pain to do. And our Instagram is like instant. Like it's like cool case study, boom, online. Not like, all right, let me go code this in and do stuff. So just like being consistent on like sharing what you're doing, because you never know like who might stumble upon it, who has a resource that you have in like your circle of people that can recommend you for something. And just keep it putting the feelers out there. And then like once you start feeling like confident and like good and seeing other pages like brands and stuff like that, DM them. The worst thing I would say is no. You don't have to turn in your design card if you get denied by something. Like, pitch stuff. I don't know, like there's so many things in marketing and design where like the campaigns now are designed by someone who just like had an interest in it. And they like threw out the idea of like, hey, I made this thing. I thought it'd be cool for you guys. And they're like, oh, how about we just pay you to come in the house and do that, So I think just like the biggest thing is just doing the work and knowing that like it doesn't have to be perfect or at the level that you think it needs to be at right now. And just focus on like getting there. And the only way you get better is by doing it. It's not thinking about like, oh, eventually I'll get there. I really want to be good at motion. It's just making stuff that sucks until it doesn't. Like, and oddly enough, like people get paid to make really crappy stuff. Paid a lot of money sometimes for stuff that's like half-baked ideas, and they just didn't have time, and someone internal was like, good enough, and it goes out. So definitely, and I've seen it, trust me, like the wool has been pulled off my eyes. I've seen so much on the back end of stuff where I'm like, oh, I can't wait to work with this group. They're gonna have their shit together. I'm gonna learn so much. And I come in and they're like, what do we do? I'm like, what? Me? I was gonna learn from you. So just know like these rooms that people are in like they don't have it all figured out. A great example for that is I thought Travis's team, I'm like, you guys do all this stuff. You make everything, right? You guys are gonna just have it so dialed together. It was a firestorm. But it was cool because like I got to come in, and as soon as I saw that like they didn't know what they were doing in this certain category that I knew a lot about, the imposter syndrome of being like I shouldn't be here, just like was like, oh, it's crazy. You guys don't know how to do this, and I do. Like, perfect. I just built, a relationship with that camp. Got to work with like people on their team and like help them learn stuff, and was like, hey, this other thing, need help with that? Or like, yes, and just turned into like more stuff to work on. But I definitely didn't feel qualified going into like half the things I've ever gone into. And then you realize on the other side of it is a bunch of people that are looking for solutions themselves, and you're in there for a reason. Yeah, that's something to remember when you get to a certain point. Like you're asked to be a part of something for a reason. Someone hired you for a reason. It wasn't just like, I don't know, maybe. So like you should be there. You just like have that confidence and just know it doesn't have to be perfect. Stuff, you will make mistakes. Stuff will go out, and guess what? I guarantee from that mistake you make, you'll never make that mistake again, especially if it goes to print. We used to have to do, we had a fun time early YBG days where you had to do push-ups based on how many files you didn't embed when you sent it over. Tell you what, people are embedding files a lot better now. Matt did a lot of push-ups. Huge. Questions over here? Good. All right. Well, if you guys think of stuff, we got time. DM me, shoot me an email. Happy to chat. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank
you. Rock goodies too. Like a bunch of stuff to share.
All right, homies. At least you could be here, but sucks.
Yeah, you're in person. It always benefits being in person.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.